Malvern has often been described as one of the loveliest areas in England. Situated at the southwest corner of Worcestershire, deep in the heart of England, it has been blessed by nature with superb scenery, invigorating air, pure water, and a wonderful range of hills, one of the oldest in Europe. As you'll see, the town of Malvern goes back a long way, certainly as far as the 11th century, when the Priory church was founded. Long before this, though, there were two Iron Age fortifications, one on the Herefordshire Beacon, British camp, and the other well hidden by trees and foliage on Midsummer Hill. No less than 6 townships nestle along the line of hills. The largest is Great Malvern, which has grown almost entirely since 1800, when it became known as a spa town. Broad, tree-lined avenues lead past the many open spaces to the centre, where typical Victorian buildings cling to the steep hillside. For the energetic, there are miles of footpaths to be found on the hills, some easy, some not so easy. The summit of the Worcestershire Beacon can be reached in under an hour from the centre of Great Malvern. The reward is a fantastic panoramic view of several counties laid out in a carpet of glory. Towards the end of the 19th century, increasing encroachments on the hills and commons threatened to destroy the unique characteristics of this area. Indiscriminate building, and above all the ever-increasing quarrying activities, presented many problems. Fortunately, the dangers were faced just in time by the creation of the Malvern Hills Conservators. Their powers and duties were, and still are, to preserve the natural beauty of the hills and commons. John Parsons is the head ranger.
Malvern Hills Conservators, created under Act of Parliament in 1884, were given certain responsibilities concerning the management of the hills and commons. These were to keep the hills and the commons open for the benefit, recreation and enjoyment of the public, and to prevent any buildings, enclosures and encroachment on the hills and commons, to preserve the natural beauty of the hills and commons, and to protect the trees, bushes and grassland. Also to do nothing which would take away or adversely affect the rights of commoners. It can easily be seen that the very fulfillment of these responsibilities give rise to conflicts. The great attraction of the hills brings to them each year over 1 million visitors, as well as local residents who use the hills and commons on a daily basis. The very number of people, together with their vehicles and dogs, has practically driven off all the stock owned by the commoners off the hills. People also erode and from time to time despoil with litter the surface of the hills. A balance between the interests of these parties is difficult to maintain, but by sensitive management and a skilled workforce, the 3,000 acres of hills and commons which lie within the jurisdiction of the conservators are today, despite the many pressures to which they are subjected, in a better state than ever. To preserve this position, we need the understanding and cooperation of visitors who spend perhaps only a day on the hills, and of course residents who live here.
The 9-mile range of hills stands out from afar with its distinctly clean and uncluttered silhouette. The attractions within the Malvern area are many and varied. It's perhaps only fair to start in the heart of Malvern with the Priory, and then visit a few places of interest which are close by.
Great Malvern Priory is a magnificent church in the centre of Great Malvern, and very appropriately situated at the foot of the Malvern Hills, which gives a marvellous backcloth to this fine building. The Priory, in fact, was part of a Benedictine monastery that was built here some 900 years ago. Architecturally, it's famous for its combination of Norman and then perpendicular styles of architecture, and particularly it's noted for the fine medieval glass that it contains. And this glass is some of the finest you can find in any parish church in the country. The glass dates back to the 15th century, and it has had to be restored in subsequent years, but it still is a very fine collection. One window, for instance, has been dedicated to St. Anne, and St. Anne's Well is a well-known point on the hills here at Malvern. It's also famous for the locally manufactured encaustic tiles. They are a rarity of great interest and have now been set in the wall as to prevent them being damaged. Another feature of interest is an outstanding set of finely carved misericords in the monk stalls. These were supports to help the monks at prayer, to help them when they got tired. Now, the rest of the monastery was destroyed at the time of the Reformation, but the church itself was purchased from the royal commissioners by the local community to serve as their parish church. Allegedly, they paid a mere £20 to acquire it, and although it went through a time of some decay and neglect, from the last century it has been very fully restored and carefully maintained. However, Great Malvern Priory is by no means simply a museum of antiquarian interest. It's a thriving parish church at the heart of the town, serving the community in numerous ways. Our services of worship are very varied in order to suit a wide variety of tastes, and that includes, of course, those of the many visitors who come here. Amongst other things, the Priory has a very fine choral tradition. You'll also find that there's a sizable bookstall here, selling a wide range of Christian literature. So then the Priory is a place not only of great architectural interest and artistic beauty, it's also a hallowed place for prayer and reflection, a centre for warm Christian worship, and a place that seeks to witness to our Lord Jesus Christ, whom we as members of this church are privileged to serve.
Malvern is fortunate to have facilities like the Winter Gardens complex, which consists of the Great Hall and a 900-seater theatre and a 400-seater cinema. We owe this mainly to the Victorian era and the water cure, which made Malvern a very, very special spa resort and brought many, many famous people here. Because of that, there was a need for an entertainment complex. This entertainment complex is, of course, now being modernised and is used continuously throughout the year for ballet, opera, drama, professional and amateur, and a very, very good pantomime. The Great Hall, or ballroom as we call it, is used also for wrestling and conferences, concerts and antique and craft fairs and many, many other events throughout the year. The cinema has a daily programme and is open 364 days of the year. Malvern also became famous in 1929 when the first Malvern Festival was held here, and George Bernard Shaw was asked by his good friend Barry Jackson, who lived in Malvern, to write a play for this festival. The festival has continued and grows each year from strength to strength. We have always tried to include both Elgar and Shaw in our programmes in the festival, as this is what we believe Malvern is very, very special for. The complex also plays host once a year to a film festival, and it is interesting to note that the very, very first film festival in the world was held in Malvern. The complex is situated in Priory Park, which is 7 acres of beautifully landscaped gardens, very colourful in spring, summer, autumn and winter, with bulbs and shrubs. A number of very, very special trees are also to be found in the park, including a handkerchief tree, and this is normally in full blossom during May and is very, very worth seeing. Adjoining the park is our recently opened Splash Leisure Pool, which was opened by the Earl and Countess Spencer, who have a great affinity with Malvern, both through the Spas Federation and the fact that Countess Spencer's grandmother once lived in the town and she spent most of her summer holidays here. The Splash is a £2.8 million pool with wave-making machine and other water facilities, a separate restaurant which can cater for just a snack or a full 3-4 course a la carte menu. Malvern has always welcomed visitors, going right back to the Victorian days for those who came for the water cure, and we would like to have the opportunity of welcoming you here to Malvern to see and experience our very, very special town. For further information on all parts of the district, contact our Tourist Information Centre, which is in Church Street, Malvern.
The gatehouse to the Priory was set into a wall that completely encircled the Priory and monastic buildings, but the wall's long since gone. You can still see the original timbers where the huge gates were hung. Visitors to the Priory knocked on the gates, and after the porter had checked their identity, he'd let them in. Often the visitors were beggars who'd be given food and sent away. Over the years, the building's been used for various purposes, and until fairly recently, there was a road running through it. Unfortunately, in 1979, an ice cream van got wedged underneath and did so much damage the archway was closed off to traffic. It's been a museum for nearly 10 years now. It's open from Easter until the end of October, every day except Wednesday, from 10:30 to 5 o'clock. It's full of fascinating facts and features. Inside, it's divided into 5 separate areas. There's a geological section with information on the geology of the hills, and a medieval section where you can find out about Malvern Forest and Chase and the history of the Priory. The Victorian room covers a variety of aspects of life in Victorian Malvern. There's education, costume, household equipment and the railway. There's also a late Victorian dentist's drill, a really fearful bit of torture. The modern section's got exhibitions on the Malvern Festival and George Bernard Shaw, Morgan Cars, the Royal Signals and Radar Establishment, and the Malvernia car, which was built in Malvern and was the first British petrol-driven car. We mustn't forget the water cure room, which shows the growth of Malvern as a water cure town and a tourist attraction. The water cure was brought to Malvern by Dr. Gully and Dr. Wilson in the early 1840s. They'd studied the water cure treatment in Austria and decided it was a useful alternative medicine, preferable to filling patients full of pills and potions. Holyrood House was built for Dr. Gully's female patients, and right next door is the Tudor Hotel, built for his male patients. The bridge between was known as the Bridge of Sighs because it separated the men from the women at all times. Rich, fat people used to come here for a month at a time. Their typical day would start at 6 a.m. when the windows were rudely thrown open. The patient would be wrapped in cold, wet sheets for an hour. Then they'd be put naked into the shallow bath and have cold water poured over them. After a vigorous rubbing down, they had to walk on the hills, sampling a glass of water at each of the springs. The combination of fresh air, exercise and pure water quite naturally did them a power of good, and after the month there'd be a picture of health. By the 1870s, the chief water cure doctors had died, and the popularity of the water cure declined with them. Malvern was left with excellent facilities, large elaborate hotels and beautiful gardens, and the railway continued to bring Victorian visitors to the town. And many years later, Malvern's still as popular as ever.
Water has shaped Malvern in one form or another over thousands of years. Perhaps Schweppes is the most famous company associated with this pure and simple product, but there are many other springs in the area. St Anne's Well is only a short walk from Bellevue Terrace.
St Anne's Well was used to baptise people because it was associated with various cures like curing eye sores and skin diseases, and therefore it was put under the protection of a saint, and St Anne, who is Jesus' grandmother, is the patron saint of springs and also a very popular local saint. Probably the most famous thing about St Anne's Well is it contains the original source of Malvern spring water, which is famous for its purity and drunk by the Queen and Prime Minister. The building over the spring was built in 1815 to exploit the water and give it to people as they came up here. The octagonal rooms that are next door to the spring were added on in 1844 when Malvern became famous for the water cure. Those who were too ill or too lazy to come up on foot would come up by donkey, and their first port of call would be St Anne's Well, probably for a cup of tea and some cakes as well, and then go on up to the beacon and then over the hills to the other side where there are more springs. The building of St Anne's Well, like a lot of the Malvern area, is associated with Elgar. I understand that Elgar's publisher designed the building, and Elgar is supposed to have flown his kite from St Anne's Knoll and to have paddled in the little pool just below St Anne's Well. On the wall outside St Anne's Well is a plaque to George Pullen. He played the harmonium outside the building for over 50 years. Apparently he used to walk from Storage every day with his harmonium on his back, and that's 4 miles each way. Some of the elderly customers to St Anne's Well these days can still remember George Pullen. He used to play requests for a penny. I believe at the end of his life he actually married the woman who ran St Anne's Well. Perhaps he was getting fed up with walking over the hills and back each day. Continuing the history of servicing people at St Anne's Well with tea and coffee, these days St Anne's Well is now a whole food cafe. We use the water for the hot drinks in the cafe and serve homemade food and cakes and so on. Upstairs is a bar function room which is used on fairly regular basis for christenings, weddings, birthday parties, leaving do's, and also quite frequently for concerts and poetry readings because the dome ceiling provides excellent acoustics in the room. The cafe's open every day from the middle of March through to the end of October, and then at weekends over the winter period and for a longer spell over Christmas time and Easter. Unfortunately, the Beacon Cafe, which was the only other cafe on the hill, burnt down some while ago, so we're now the only port of call for tea and coffee on the hills.
On the lower eastern slopes of the hills on the outskirts of the town is the Three Counties Showground, a key location of many national and local events such as the Three Counties Show.
The Three Counties Show has something for everybody: entertainment in the main ring, conservation, farm, sideshows, trade stands, all sorts of displays. Nobody could fail to be interested in something, some aspect of the show. There's the animals for the children, entertainment, show jumping and so on in the main ring, and usually on the village green in Ambridge you will find all sorts of sideshows and entertainment to interest all walks, all ages. But the flower show encourages everybody to go home and get their seeds and hoes and spades out to get on and do something to achieve the same. Over the 3 days we expect well over 100,000 people. June is the ideal time and the weather is usually very kind to the show. It's a permanent fixture in many people's diaries. The ground itself is used for many other events throughout the year: antiques fairs, dog shows, horse shows, pony shows, car events. We have October sees one of the major car event of the year. It's best to check with the local press as to what in fact is happening in any particular week throughout the year.
The Animal and Bird Garden Centre is only half a mile further on from the Three Counties ground. Owned by Chris and Judith Cox, it's not only a popular family attraction, but also a sanctuary for many endangered species.
When people come to the gardens, the first thing they notice as they come through our entrance to our shop, that all the animals are very tame. And we try and get the general public as close as possible to the animals, which of course you can imagine is very difficult to do that. But people love it because they can get very close to the animals, and we even let people handle snakes and all the reptiles, which go down very, very well. The children are always enthralled by the snakes. They love the gardens because they can have goes on the miniature railway. It's a narrow gauge railway. They go right round the garden. It's a mile track. They can go in the play area, and we have a catering cabin for mums and dads to have their cups of coffee and cakes and what have you, while the children put all the animals. You know, it's very important that the public come and support their local zoo or wildlife park so we can do more work with these fantastic endangered species. Now, if you go down to the monkey house, you'll be able to see rough lemurs, ringtail lemurs, and some of the small monkeys like the marmosets, tamarins and things like that. Also, they can see the most popular things, apes like gibbons, here at the gardens. Millie and Brian, always very popular, swinging about their climbing frames. And also black spider monkeys. They can even see wallabies with joeys in the pouches certain times of the year. South American rheas, the like ostrich-type birds from South America. And we even have a children's pets corner, where the children can see the familiar animals like guinea pigs, rabbits. And funnily enough, we even have porcupines and meerkats in there, but usually it's usually see the most popular things. We have about 40,000 visitors that come and see us every year. They come and see our around 100 species of animals, birds, reptiles, which is ever-growing. It's an ever-growing family. And this year, very exciting, we're doing an otter project on the short-clawed or the Asian otter, which I'm sure all the artists will be coming down and the photographers will be coming down to watch them, studying the animal's behaviour, the animal's colour. It always fascinates me, the artwork that people can actually produce on paper. These are most amazing creatures.
At Beam of Malvern, we strive for perfection when creating flowers, birds and animals in fine bone porcelain. Only the perfect ever survive. Visitors are welcome to our showroom Mondays to Fridays between 9 and 5. Prince Charles, when visiting, stated to Mrs. Beam, "Only the fragrance is missing."
Beam China is one of a number of internationally recognised companies based in Malvern. Although Britain's first petrol-driven car, the Malvernian, was built in Malvern, the area is more associated these days with Morgan cars, hand-built classics. The Morgan factory is not normally open to the public, but no doubt should you wish to purchase one of these magnificent machines, a visit could be arranged. Just a short drive from Malvern, in the small village of Muchmarcle, is one of the oldest historic homes in England, Helen's.
This is Helen's. It was built in 1292. Much of the land here was owned by a powerful Norman baron, Mortimer, whose daughter Iseult married a handsome red-haired young man called Lord Audley, and they built their home here and they called it Muchmarcle Audley. It was a small castle made entirely of stone, as can be seen today when you look at the foundation of the present house. The cellars are still of the original stone. 200 years later, their great-grandchildren part built it in brick, said to be one of the first houses in England to be built by Flemish brick builders. This room is the only room which is left as it was from the beginning, the main hall of the castle, used as a dining room for the whole household, wooden trestle tables being added to the high table of stone. It's a stone, you see it's a stone altar with 5 crosses, one on each corner, one in the centre. In 1400, Mary Tudor visited here, and these chairs were made for her visit. They're made in bog oak. The princess's chair is an inch higher than the Lord of the Manors, I suppose that she could look down on him. Above the fireplace you'll see the Prince of Wales feathers. They were from the Battle of Crécy, when young James Audley and the Black Prince were fighting in France. The Black Prince sent a message from Chester to say that he was riding over to Hereford City and would like to spend the night at James' old schoolmate's home. James quickly called in some masons to prepare the decoration of the fireplace to surprise and please his visitor. The 3 feathers and the motto, misspelt, but no doubt as good as the masons could do, in such a short time was ready in time when the Black Prince arrived the following night, said to be one of the earliest stone renderings of the famous badge of the Prince of Wales. And they also had a licence to hang. Of course, the gallows have long since gone, but they still hold the licence. It's never been rescinded. So if there's anyone you want hung, you just bring them here, leave them with us. This is Mary Tudor's room. Mary Tudor visited here when she was 12 years old. As you see, her initials are on the fireplace, but not the crest. And in 1554, after she'd married her Spanish consort, she was going to return here, and the war winds probably improved the decoration by putting the coat of arms on the wall. And in this room, the poor old priest was killed underneath, an 80-year-old priest. He was killed by the Roundheads when they broke into this house during the Civil War, and he died underneath the window which is there. I'm sure you will be interested with the dovecot in the garden. It was used for many purposes. It was used to the prisoners who were found guilty. They were kept overnight. Of course, if they had to be hung, they were kept there as well. And it was also used for the wives and they used to put wives and children in there during problems, and when the problems had passed, they used to bring them out. Also meat for the winter. It had many purposes, and it was given as a wedding gift to Fulk Warren and Margaret Pye in 1641. I'm sure you would enjoy a visit to Helen's. We're open on Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays from Good Friday until the end of September. The visiting hours are from 2 till 6, and we go around on the hour at 2, 3, 4 and 5. It takes an hour and 20 minutes to go round the house, but I'm sure you would enjoy it. It's full of interest.
The Herefordshire Beacon, or British camp, was built around the 2nd century BC and is one of the finest earthworks in Britain. A climb to the top never fails to impress upon visitors its success as a hill fort. Defended against the Roman invasion some years later, it was virtually impregnable. No matter the weather, British camp never loses its bold, defiant strength. It serves as an eerie reminder of the ghosts of those who fought here centuries ago. At the bottom of the steep eastern slope is Little Malvern Priory and Court. Their intriguing history dates back to the 12th century.
The early monks were very good at finding a right place to live and a good place to live, and so a couple of brothers came and settled here under the hill, facing into the sun, a stream available for water and a pond, presumably, because there's still a pond, and eventually this became a Benedictine priory. A daughter church from the priory at Worcester. Never were there very many here, probably only a dozen, 18 monks, but somehow they built the huge building, of which this tiny fragment is only a little part. But it originally had great nave and transepts and side chapels, and of course a lot of farmland round it and a lot of work went on round it. The present nave was the original chancel, the part for the monks where they would come and sing their office, and the lay folk would be in the side chapels either side. An example of that is the hagioscopes, as they're properly called. They're commonly known as squints, and they give a sight through from the side chapels through to the high altar. These are the original monk stalls, been here possibly since 1480, when the church was rebuilt by Bishop Alcock. The altar itself is very interesting in that it has a huge stone slab on a wooden trestle with its consecration crosses marked at the corners, and extremely interesting, in the centre there is a hexagon of different stone where a section has been taken out, and that clearly is a reliquary, so that the bones of a saint or some other similar relic will have been inserted into the altar. Above the altar there is the ancient glass, and we know that comes from 1482. It is the royal family 3 years before the Battle of Bosworth. One of the joys of the place, of course, is that it isn't just a museum. It is full of good things done by this generation, and this present generation has left its mark in the woven work that it's done here. The coats of arms, the hatchments, as they're called properly, on the walls here, they are of the Russell or the Berrington family, the present family at the court, who's been here, 300 years or so. It's a good place to go and see.
The priory and the court were built all at one time, from the middle to the end of the 12th century. And the priory continued up until the dissolution of the monasteries, when Henry VIII closed the monasteries, sent the monks packing, and the house then became a private house for the first time. A family called Russell from Strensham were able to lease the house, and then Henry Russell, the son of John, was able to buy the house from Mary Tudor. And from that day to this, it's been in the same family. It has passed through the female line, but it's now back in the Berrington family. The first Berrington came to live here in about 1640. The interesting point is that obviously after the dissolution the church went to the Church of England, but the Russells were a Catholic family, and we had the extraordinary situation of a Catholic family living on the doorstep of the church, the Protestant church. But history relates that they've, through the years, got on very happily. Obviously there were many searches made in the house. Nothing was ever found, and they stuck to their faith and lived under very difficult times. When the visitors come, we give them a guided tour of the house, which takes about 45 minutes. They see this hall and all the various interesting things in it, the collection of small prints and watercolours around the little ante-room walls, which are very interesting historically and show the various changes in the court. They also see this lovely collection of needlework and various religious relics, all connected with the house, all found here and collected by my mother-in-law when she did large restoration work in the 1960s. There's also a very interesting collection of vestments which were worn by priests taking services here, and they've been restored by the nuns at Stanbrook Abbey, and they are available to be seen by the visitors. If we go outside, you can see round the grounds. The main feature is the large lime tree outside the house, which is well over 200 years old, and the fish ponds, which were the monks' fish ponds, which are our lakes today. What is it like to live in a house like this? Well, it's a terrific pleasure and it's a great privilege, but it's also a lot of hard work, and I have a marvellous team of people who help me because I couldn't manage without it. We're open during the summer from mid-April to mid-July on Wednesday and Thursday afternoons from 2:30 till 5. We give guided tours and the visitors are able to see the garden once they've seen the house.
On the opposite side of British Camp is Eastnor Castle. The grounds of Eastnor Park extend to the edge of the hills, and the obelisk, a memorial to members of the Somers family, is situated at the highest point.
My family came to this estate in 1590 and lived in a perfectly normal small house down where the lake is now. But by the beginning of the 19th century, they had had a very distinguished career in politics and in law, and decided it was time to put themselves on the map with a really serious house. A lot of people were building big houses like that at the time, and it was a period when people were looking back in architectural terms. They commissioned a very dynamic young architect called Smirke to build a Norman Revival castle, and that's what you see today. It is, if you stand on the Malvern Hills and look down towards us, you might think that it was a real castle. When you get closer, you see there's actually glass in the windows. But it's designed to impress and designed to make people think, if only briefly, that the family are a long-standing medieval origins. When you come in, the first thing, which is really stunningly impressive, is the big hall. It's impressive for a number of reasons. It's very high, it's at least 60 foot high, and it's also dominated by now large furniture and armour. After the hall, there's a smaller hall where we've got more suits of armour and a very fine Italian suit of armour on horseback, and that leads into the dining room where most of the family portraits are. If you then move across the Red Hall from the dining room, you come to the Gothic drawing room, which is in complete contrast in style. Smirke liked something plain and fairly simple, very early Gothic style. This is a room designed by Pugin and is our Gothic drawing room. Pugin was designing at the same time the interior of the House of Lords, and this is very high Gothic, very ornate, wonderful fireplace designed by Crace, fantastic chandelier in the middle, and some of the furniture is also designed by Pugin for the room. Moving on from that room, you come to another room which my wife has just redecorated, which we call the Octagon Room. That has wonderful views over the lake, and there are some more family portraits, and over the door leading into the Great Hall, a picture of Philip Cox, who looks as if he's dressed as a girl, but apparently that was normal in those days. That's by Rumley, and he is the person from whom we are directly descended today. Now, if you go into the library, this is another very impressive room. The books came from a collection of a famous Worcestershire historian, Dr. Treadway Nash, whose daughter was the wife of the first Earl. The library is designed in the Italian style, so it's, if you like, a Renaissance room, and the third Earl Somers commissioned workmen in Italy to make all the bookshelves to his order, and incorporating his coat of arms and his initials in the woodwork, and then it was assembled in that room. Back through the staircase hall, you go into the state bedroom, which has got a wonderful four-poster bed, but I can tell you it's extremely uncomfortable. And then through the dressing room, which we've now converted into a shop, back into the Great Hall. Up on the Malvern Hills, you'll see a monument which was built by Smirke in memory of the son of the builder of the castle, who was the one who was killed in Spain. And you'll also see some very fine pine trees from a collection which was started in the mid-19th century by the third Earl. The castle's been open to visitors from the 1840s, and I'm pleased to say it's still open today. We're open on Sundays in the summer and on bank holiday Mondays, except at Christmas,
We're also open on Wednesdays and Thursdays in July and August. The castle's open in the afternoons only from 2 till 6 o'clock.
During the 18th century, a versatile Englishman of parts, Dr. John Wall, began to help establish Malvern as a spa town. In Worcester, he's known for starting the Royal Worcester Porcelain Works. In Malvern, it's more for his writings and involvement with the Holy Well and the purity of the water which flowed so copiously.
Malvern water, said Dr. John Wall, is famous for containing just nothing at all. Now, there is nothing whatsoever remarkable in Malvern water. The secret to Malvern water's fame is purity is the fact that it has nothing in it. And if we take such substances as lead, tin, zinc, copper, cadmium, aluminium, the toxics or poisons, we find that there is less than 0.01 of a millionth part. It's an incredibly pure state of affairs. And in physical terms, the water has no colour, no smell, no turbidity, and it is balanced between acid and alkaline with a pH figure of 7.1. It runs bacteriologically clean. You'll see from these photographs the condition of the building at the time that we found it. The roof had to be literally taken off and rebuilt. The water had been coming out of the hillside, going through the back wall of the building and coming out through the front door. Although people can come here by ancient custom, as weary travellers may refresh themselves from the water of the spring without let, hindrance or tithe, delightful old stuff this, they are not entitled to take the water away. With the result that when we had inquiries for the water, we produced 1.5 litre bottles to satisfy the tourist trade. We do not bottle the water on a heavily commercial basis. We bottle it on a cottage industry basis, and it's available through the tourist trade. We're frequently asked, of course, about the future of the Holy Well and what form it will take. And I can only say that the whole history of the Holy Well is created by the people that have come here and visited. So far as the future of the Holy Well is concerned, as long as there are people wanting to drink this pure water, the Holy Well will be here.
The Malvern Hills meant a very great deal to Elgar. He said to one of his friends on one occasion on the subject of the most popular of all his works, the Cello Concerto, he said, "When I've gone and you're walking the Malvern Hills and you hear this tune, don't worry, it's only me." Now, the hills meant a lot to Elgar. They seemed to draw him back towards Worcestershire right throughout his life. In his early days, he had many interests, and included amongst those many interests was kite flying. And he used to go up in the hills with friends and enjoy himself flying kites. I'm sure he would have designed some of these kites as well himself. The little cottage in Lower Broad Heath between Worcester and Malvern is beautifully situated, looking across the Teme Valley towards the Malvern Hills, and this is where Elgar was born in 1857. Unfortunately, they were not able to remain here very long because father was developing a music shop in Worcester. But Elgar's mother made certain that he was brought back frequently throughout his childhood, and it's possibly in that way that his great feeling for the place continued to develop. There are people that around here who still remember him in his old age, driving up from Worcester, coming up the path to the cottage door and offering the tenant of the day a copper or two or a shilling or two to enter the house himself and spend some few moments on his own. And just before the war, by dint of very great amount of effort on the part of his daughter Caris, it was opened as a museum, and she presented the major collection that is on show here. There's no doubt that this little cottage and the countryside around here meant an enormous amount to Elgar and influenced his creative ideas. People who come here have a feeling of the presence of Elgar, and they can, in some small way, experience, I think, some of the wonderful things that Elgar experienced when he was composing his music. The birthplace is open to the public every day of the week except Wednesdays. During the summertime, that is from May till October, from 10 in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening.
Of course, there's more to Malvern and the surrounding area than we can possibly show in this video. In any season, the scenery is always spectacular, there are many fascinating and varied places to visit, and you're always assured of a warm welcome.